So we are going live now.
Bonsoir tout le monde. My name is Nyya Flores Toussant. I am a 2019 graduate of Union Theological Seminary, and I am your host for this evening. First, giving glory and honor to God, who is Lord of my life, then to the Spirit of Christ and the meddling hands of the Loi from IET that have brought me a mighty long way while teaching me that the just shall live by faith. I bless the Lord on tonight for all who are gathered, and therefore the evident continuation of God's mighty hand and outstretched arm. We welcome you to this night of prophetic proclamation, clergy against immoral politics. We pray that today you are moved by the Holy Ghost and the communion of saints towards taking a stand against immoral evangelical politics and Supreme Court rulings. Tonight is our final celebration of Black August this year. Black August is a time of remembering the Black freedom fighters globally who are long gone and still incarcerated. Black August is a time to continue in the prophetic. Before our opening remarks from Reverend Dr. Samuel Cruz, I would like to take time to introduce our speakers of the night. As we celebrate Black August, it is important to note that each of these speakers identifies as Black American. And either they're Black American from the US mainland or from the colony of Puerto Rico. It is in my opinion that they are all engaged in today's struggle for Black freedom. Bishop Yvette Flunder's blending of proclamation, worship, service, and advocacy on behalf of the most marginalized in church and in society led to the founding of the City of Refuge United Church of Christ in 1991. In 2003, Dr. Flunder was consecrated presiding bishop of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, a multi-denominational coalition of over 100 primarily African-American Christian leaders and laity. She received her doctorate of ministry from San Francisco Theological Seminary. Father Luis Barrios is a certified clinical trauma professional and a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And he is also a professor of Latinx theology at the Episcopal Divinity School and Union Theological Seminary. Father Barrios is an Episcopal priest in charge of Holy Road Church and Iglesia Santa Cruz in Upper Manhattan. He attained his PhD in clinical psychology at Carlos Albizu University. Reverend Dr. Vanessa M. Brown is a licensed and ordained minister, currently serving as the senior pastor of Rivers of Living Water Ministries, UCC, a radically inclusive ministry located in Harlem and Newark, New Jersey. I have to big up New Jersey as a Jersey boy. Reverend Dr. Vanessa M. Brown is part of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, where the presiding prelate is Bishop Yvette Flunder. She attained her doctorate of ministry from New York Theological Seminary, and I should say has been consecrated as bishop-elect of the Northeast region, correct me if I'm wrong. Reverend Dr. Juan A. Carmona is an ordained minister in the Reformed Church in America. He was born and raised in New York City by his Puerto Rican family. He received a doctorate of ministry in liberation theology from Colgate Rochester Divinity School. He is a retired prison chaplain with the New York State Department of Correctional Services and has taught at various institutions of higher education. So these are our speakers tonight. I will note that Reverend Carmona may have some technical issues, but we are praying that the Spirit works those things out. And we thank God for the special prophetic anointing on each of our speakers. And we thank them for being here tonight. After our opening remarks, we will enter into a time of discussion with our clergy, followed by a short Q&A with Bishop Flunder and Bishop Brown, and then a second Q&A with Reverend Carmona and Father Barrios. Ministers Bridget Webster, Joshua Campbell, and Hayes McClendon are our virtual ushers on tonight, and they will be happy to take your questions in the chat box. Now we will hear some opening remarks from my dear mentor, Dr. Samuel Cruz. Reverend Dr. Samuel Cruz is an associate professor of religion and society at Union Theological Seminary and the pastor of Trinity Lutheran Church in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Over the last 15 years, Dr. Cruz has been conducting ethnographic research on urban and Caribbean Latinx religion. And I will add that that is his ministry. All of this focused predominantly on Pentecostalism and African-based Caribbean/Latinx religions, as well as comparative analyses of Latinx religion and Euro-American religious traditions. So I thank you all for being with us. We welcome you once, we welcome you twice, we welcome you with the love of Jesus Christ. And I pass it over to Dr. Cruz.
Good evening, everyone. Like Nyya said, I'm the Reverend Dr. Samuel Cruz, and I am extremely excited to be moderating this panel that I put together because of the panelists that are here. I really don't know of anyone better than the panelists that are here to address some of these questions. The panelists are prophetic voices that are committed to the church, to their communities, and to justice, and do it in very smart ways beyond that. So they bring experience and theory to this process. And I want to begin, the purpose of the panel is to address issues that right-wing, white nationalist supremacists have brought to the forefront of this society to take away people's rights in different areas. Racism and white supremacy seems to be what leads many of these so-called Christians. And I'm sorry to say so-called Christians. I don't like to really speak badly of anyone, but the truth is that if you're advocating for death, you can't be very nice. And that's the way I see it. If you don't care about the lives of the LGBT people, if you don't care about the lives of people of color, if you don't care about the lives of immigrants, that can't be Christian theology. That's a theology of death. And we hope to show many people that there are other voices within the Christian tradition that advocate for life and not death. So I'm going to start off this addressing my first question mainly to Bishop Flunder and Bishop-elect Brown, and Father Barrios and Juan Carmona, if he's on, he could also respond to it. The issue of reproductive rights, which has been challenged now with the Supreme Court rulings, and we know, I should ask, could somebody mute them, please? And we know that it's not only a belief system, but there's hatred behind it because they're looking for all sorts of ways of keeping women from having a choice with their bodies. They're not only, the Supreme Court didn't only knock it down, they're trying now to prosecute and criminalize, even if a woman could go someplace else to have control over her body. So, Bishop Flunder, we could start with you. What do you have to say about that issue from a perspective of a Christian?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, my brother, and all of my colleagues for welcoming me and welcoming Bishop-elect Vanessa on behalf of the churches that we pastor and our work with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. First, let me say, I'm finding the reaction that we are experiencing in terms of controlling women and women's bodies, not to be new. This is not new news. I think that the intent to control women and control women's bodies, like many other things that we have listened to here of late, when the conservative voices are seeking essentially to take control. And I'm not an anti-conservative in every conceivable way, let's put it that way. But I am anti when people use the realities of conservative Christianity and conservative faith or conservative reading of the text in order to imprison other people. And I think that what we are experiencing, again, is not new. And let me just take this long reach and say, there's a lot of Bible that encourages controlling women. That's not new news. It has happened. Hold on just a minute. Nubian, I can hear you on my Zoom. Okay. I'm sorry, I had to get my household under control. It's not new news. That's the point I'm trying to make. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that just about everything that we're experiencing right now is a rehearsing of what has happened historically. And there is some scripture that people pull out for all of this. Everything that has to do with, for instance, the importance of all women who were a part of Israel, making themselves available to have as many baby Israelites as they possibly could, and as many children as their bodies would allow, was the role and responsibility of women. And anyone who pushed back against that was problematic. It's been true in just about every kind of faith that is generated through and by what we call the Christian canon. It's not new. It's problematic when a race of people want to be dominant, and particularly when that race of people want to be dominant and they find that the birth rate is getting smaller and smaller in their population. The United States will be a country with a predominant people of color population by the time my grandsons are grown. There's a certain inevitability about that. So this is not an angry group of people just because women are having abortions or trying not to have babies out of season, they think, in their lives. This is an intention of a group of people wanting to make sure that their race stays numerically in control. That is also very biblical, because the way that the scripture reads, it reads as though there are a chosen people who have to make sure that they are sovereign in some way. And everyone who wants to be sovereign somehow suggests that those chosen people are talking about them, which is an interesting oxymoron when you really get to thinking about it. It was Jews then, it was certain other races, and now the Anglo-Saxon reality of whiteness has decided to have a superior power over dynamic, which means that their women have to have babies. This is not a fight against women of color having babies. There are no low birth rates among women of color, I can assure you. The numbers it doesn't show up that way. The low birth rates are among educated, decision-making women of Anglo-Saxon, women who are white, who are the ones who are having low birth rates. And the intention is now only lift that up because that reality also is the reality that justified slavery. Something that they found in the Bible. Slaves obey your masters was the root of the Dred Scott reality, that somehow or another, Dred Scott could not be a citizen because he wasn't fully human. He wasn't fully human because he wasn't as great and as important to the heart of God as his white counterparts. He was 3/5 human, so he couldn't be a citizen. It's an interesting concept. And it goes all the way through demonizing what we already hate, and then assigning that demonization to God. If I hate it, if I want it, if I believe in it, then God is on the side of what I feel, and which creates these oxymorons. How can the Ku Klux Klan be a faith-based organization and a 501c3 in this country? It is because it was basically considered, in its origin, doing the will of God, to put people of African and Latinx, by primarily people, in their place. because God willed it to be so. I can go on and on. It sounds like when I say this, that I'm a person who is not a biblical literalist. I'm not a big biblical literalist. I believe that my responsibility is to interpret what is the heart of God in between all of the politics that are written in the text, that are against the freedom of women, against freedom of slaves, against a belief that one group of people in one bloodline are favored more by God than anyone else. I am responsible to suggest that there's some human elements in religion that make us weaponize God against other people. And I don't think that it started with the right in this country. I don't think that it started with the colonization of Africa and Latin America. I believe that this started all the way back when folks were trying to interpret God through a lens of manifest destiny. And that is the Flunderism on that question. So there you have it. God bless you.
Bishop-elect Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz, for this opportunity, to Nyya, Toussant as well, and to all of the guests, Bishop Flunder as well. So I say a big yes and amen to everything that Bishop Flunder has said. I just want to say some things around reproductive rights, because I think that people don't really understand the nature of it. So access to safe abortion is just a matter of a human right. It's a basic human right. And the second thing I want to say is that people have abortions all the time, regardless of what the law says, and they will continue to do so. I think the other thing is that criminalizing or restricting abortion prevents doctors from providing basic care. And I think that we need to understand that we are putting women in jeopardy, right? And then I think the last thing I want to say around reproductive rights is that it's not just cisgender women and girls who need abortions, right? It's you know, it may be those who are intersex people, those who are transgender men and boys, and people with other gender identities who have the reproductive capacity to become pregnant. They also have a right to have an abortion. And so everything that Bishop Flunder said as to why this is happening, I agree with. I want to also say that in terms of white nationalism and what's happening in this country, it has polarized our country to no end. And so we have so many people that are on the opposite end of the spectrum on this, and it's bringing about hatred in this country like we've never seen before. And my prayer is that we would galvanize ourselves. Those, you know, Bishop always used to say, talk about right-thinking white people, right? I hope that right-thinking white people will step up. And I hope that those of us who are whatever denomination and religious areas that we are in would all step up to the cause and meet each other at the ballot box. And that during the midterm elections that we show up to vote, right? Not just for presidency, but for the midterm elections, which are coming up in 2 months or 3 months. We need to show up at the ballot box to show people that this is not something that we are going to stand for.
Father Barrios.
Well, thank you very much, my dear two bishops, for your enlightenment. Thank you, Sam, for putting all this kind of platform that we can bring the other voices that they've been keeping in the margin. There's a way of keeping the others out. And I don't know, you always find a way how to keep everybody in. Let's talk. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I always like to, when I need to talk about reproductive rights, is that definitely is more than abortion. That's why I prefer to use reproductive right, like Bishop Flunder was saying, and also Bishop Vanessa was emphasizing. Now, there is a male supremacy ideology in a lot of these places of worship. And one of the things that is been there for years is this belief of, first, the subordination of women, and second is the issue of male supremacy. Whatever is coming there, you can see that reflected in reproductive rights. Because one of the issues in reproductive rights that go beyond abortion, abortion is there too, is the issue of taking away from women the right to feel pleasure in sexuality. It's like the female body is there to produce pleasure, not to get pleasure. I'm so happy that, well, those people are lucky that I'm not a woman, okay? Because I'm not going to swallow that one. So the issue of reproductive right for my brothers and sisters in other denominations, this is not a theological issue, it's a human rights issue. And this is where we need to learn how to draw the line. Because in your church, you can preach whatever it is that you want to preach. But we're not dealing with that. To have the capacity to control an entity like the Supreme Court, to criminalize this particular issue, this is a social sin. And we can't just shut up and accept that. It's clear that there is no consensus when we have to talk about reproductive right in favor or against abortion. Because the Bible was not written to answer that question. It is clear. We have one Bible. I don't know how many translations, but it's only one Bible. And from that one Bible, we have more than 8,000 doctrines, which I don't have any problem with that. I think that is an incredible exercise of human diversity to interpret. I like it. But when you come to me saying, this is the only way to say that something is right, or that whatever you believe is wrong, then we have a problem. Okay? At least tell me, I have another way to interpret this particular issue. Because the Bible was not written for that purpose. It was written so we can understand that God created everything, that what God created in some way went the wrong way, and then that God has been trying to bring back in track what went in another direction. However, when you bring people to interpret, let's say the last one, which is salvation, oh my God, we have so many ways to explain how is that someone can be saved. And then we're going to ask you, so which one is right? Which one is wrong? I think everybody's right, okay? And I think everybody's wrong. When you take a side that this is the only way to do this. So the Bible was not written for that. Something else that I want to deconstruct from the beginning is that we progressive people in theology, we don't take the Bible seriously. We take the Bible seriously, very seriously. We do not take the Bible literally. That's it. That's the big difference. Okay? Which is very important to understand, because look at what happened in the book of Acts. That crisis between Peter and Paul. And at the end, in that Jerusalem council, you go this way, I go this way. We're still brothers and sisters. But you're not going to impose to me, and I'm not going to impose to you. So another way to look at this, my brothers and sisters. The Bible is our foundation, but there is nothing in the Bible to support abortion or to go against abortion. But there is something very important that we need to be very careful. Idolatry is when we create a wrong image of God. And those people who promote the hate, the rejection, A God that is looking for revenge and hating women because they perform abortion, or a church that can go into protecting reproductive rights, you have a wrong image of God. That is idolatry, and we can't tolerate that. So, thank you.
Bishop Flunder mentioned how some of the ideas behind that go against reproductive rights and the enslavement of people of African descent kind of have a similar root to it, I understood her saying. And I think that after the rights of women to have choice was struck down by the Supreme Court, Judge Clarence Thomas said that the next thing was same-sex marriage. And I have to say that I argued a little bit, embarrassed to say, with my wife along the way when she said they're gonna strike down women's rights to choose. For years, she's been saying it because she's kind of saw it coming. I never thought we would get to that point. And I thought after LGBT people got the right to marriage, if they wanted to, that once that happened, it would be permanent. But I think they hinted against that. And I guess what I'm saying is that these oppressions are interlocking, right? Intersectional. A lot of them, the root cause ultimately is white supremacy and male supremacy. So what do you have to say about same-sex marriage and why we should fight for people's rights? We could again start with Bishop Flunder, if you don't mind.
Well, I think that your wife was originally absolutely spot on. And that the fact that you all have concluded in your conversations that this is the intention. And again, it goes back to a way that things happen. When the war against among the states, North and South, when the North won and the South lost, and we have what we call an end to slavery, it wasn't an end to slavery. What it was an end to slavery as it related to a law, but people found another way to minimize and diminish people of African descent. Then you had the prison industrial complex, which began a long time ago. Then we had sharecropping and peonage and all of the other things that happened to keep people slaves by another name, is what it is that I'm saying. Well, I think the same realities are the things that we're experiencing right now, with the intention to bring us back to a conservative understanding that puts the people who consider themselves God's chosen and the ones who should be in power, which primarily are white men in this country, that they're trying to find another way to make this the powerful, holy nation that it once was in their minds. That I call it the season of Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, Andy Griffin, and all of that. So either you know or you don't know. But if you know it's about Mayberry. That's what this is really all about, right? Which, by the way, was a construct for television, not the reality of what people experience. But that's the intention. So we have we have what I call our lenses, essentially through which we see which is the right way to be in this country. And we just tag it as Christian. It will be a Christian country when we get Christian and Christianity at the forefront, from everything from children praying in school to them not praying in any way except to a Christian God, not being taught in any way except with our ideas of how family should be in terms of what the majority is. But here's where I think that you and your wife, I'd love to be there for your discussions, by the way, Brother Dr. Cruz. I want you to know, because I know that must be mighty juicy. But what I really said, and I made a note to myself, it will all come back, because this is the way the arc of justice goes. We get a freedom, then we get pushed back again. And then we go further because we realize that we didn't make that freedom concretized enough to keep ourselves from being pushed back again. So we got pushed back again. But Clarence Thomas needs to be mindful because he and his wife could get pushed back again. Because miscegenation in this country was also a decision made by the Supreme Court. The end of miscegenation, the end of interracial marriage. Let's talk about what could happen if you can come after LGBT people. You might well be able to say, well, it would never happen. Well, there were people that thought that Roe versus Wade wouldn't happen and people that thought that Obergefell wouldn't happen, but it did happen. But the pushing forward, hopefully, will be more powerful than the pushing back. And this is what I think that the religious right did not anticipate. And that is that their women sat quietly for some parts of this, such as anti-gay parts or anti-immigrant parts. But when you started talking to their women and saying to them that every baby that they got pregnant with, they have to give birth, and not only does that disturb their lives and their careers, but they're also thinking about their daughters and their daughters' lives and their daughters' education, and not being able to see their daughters through to the kinds of freedoms that they fought for. And where I think that the kickback is going to come from, even if the white women that I'm thinking about are prejudiced and anti-people of color, they are definitively more anti-you telling me what to do with my body than they are just about anything else. This is a power, the power over that started as feminism that we now call womanist ecclesiology or womanist theology. That intention is the African-American or people of color concept of what was feminism. And these feminist women are absolutely not going to let the men in their community tell them what to do with their bodies. It ain't getting ready to happen. I just think it's important for me to put it out there and say that they're going to push back like crazy. Racist or not racist, pro-Black, pro-brown, they're still not going to have, and already Kansas has showed us what is possible. And it will continue to happen. Remember, the suffragettes were also racist. Mm-hmm. That is the history of women's suffrage. It did not mean that they were not racist. They said, if you really want something done about this, brothers, get a vasectomy. I'm gonna cut off right there.
Bishop-elect Brown.
Yes, again, what Bishop Flunder is saying. I would like to also say that I think last month, the U.S. House passed a bill protecting marriage equality because of Clarence Thomas's opinion, right? What he wrote down. But at the end of the day, it's going to take us again as clergy, as people of faith, to begin to galvanize, right? We're going to have to we have to go back and do what they did 50 years ago. We're going to have to do again, the Pettus Bridge, right? We're going to have to do again all of these things that we formerly did before. We're going to have to galvanize the churches, go into congregations, like we're going to have to speak about it. And in a way that is not harmful, because we want to go in, we don't want to go in fighting, right? Everybody's going to have a right to their opinion. But I think that people, because of the cacophony of noise that is being done by the religious right, they can't really hear what anyone else is saying. And that is a part of the problem. Is like the nationalists, the white supremacists, the racists are louder than the church. The church is not having the ability to have a voice, not having the ability to speak. And we have to switch that around this time around. And it's going to happen again, as I said, at the ballot box. It is going to happen in congregations, individual by individual, denomination by denomination, to have these congregations, because these hard-won rights, marriage equality was a hard-won right that we got. It's although we have this protection by the U.S. House, it's not something that's clear-cut, right? They can come after us any day now. We don't know what they're planning. Just like they planned Roe versus Wade, and people saw it coming, but we didn't know when it was going to come. We can't wait around until something like this happens. We have to be prepared for what our next step is going to be.
You know, I think as I hear you, I think that it's so important for the leaders of the Black and Brown church not to internalize the racist misconceptions that Black and Brown people are more homophobic than other people, because really racist. The ones who ended reproductive rights right now for women were mostly white men. We need to get rid ourselves of that myth about us, because it's not true. When you look at Stonewall, it was Latina and Black trans women who started the riots. That's not spoken about. Sylvia Rivera is not even mentioned in the history books. And you look at our backgrounds, and we don't have that type of hatred. Even when we oppose LGBT, Black and Brown parents don't normally throw their kids out like other cultures do. So we need to speak more about this as leaders of the churches and understand. I think we shy away sometimes. I'm not saying about the panelists, but in general, I see people say, well, people are not ready. Well, in my church, there's sometimes 25 trans women there who sometimes are discriminated by white gay men. And so they've had more difficulties within the movement than other people. But people right now, studies show that the majority of Latino Catholics believe in choice. So I think Father Barrios mentioned earlier that it's the leadership, not the people, who have most of these issues. But Father Barrios, do you want to comment on this issue?
Yes. Well, as you know, most of what I do is from a pastoral perspective. I'm a pastor. Yes, I teach in a college for more than 30 years. I'm an academic. My passion, I became ordained because I want to become a pastor. So I'm there in the street, walking, listening, crying, feeling the pain with people. And in my experience, what most of the people believe, and I'm talking here Pentecostal, Roman Catholic, from one extreme to the other, is different from what the church as an institution believes. Okay, so I have few pastors around the church where I am, Pentecostal pastors, that they say, well, those are the most reactionary people. I say, I don't know why you say that. Okay, they can tell me, well, I know all the gays and lesbians in my church. Oh, you know that they're there. Yeah, they're sitting there. Okay, I'm glad that you know that they're there. Because it sounds like when I came to Holy Road Church, that I said, well, one of the things that I want to open here is an LGBTQ ministry. And I said that from the beginning. And if you're going to go against that, I don't want to come here. It's okay, just do it, not pushing. I'm not going to push. Okay, so I'm working on that, praying, preaching, Bible study, about inclusiveness, same-sex marriage. It was time for the board of directors, the vestry, to talk and make a decision. So I'm there, and they're ready. They say, okay. There was consensus, and one of the ladies said, okay, let me see if I understand what is going to happen here. Because it sounds like we're going to approve this LGBTQ ministry. That means that we're going to allow gay and lesbian to come inside the church and worship with us. The matriarchal woman in our church, 87 years, a Black woman. So can I say something? Yes. We always been here. Silent. Silent. She came out. Silent. They say, people were in shock. They say, but we were not aware. We never had this opportunity that we have right now to talk about this. So I thank God that before I died, I saw this. And that was the day that by unanimous decision, the church said, we're going in that direction. So One of the things that I tell people always when it comes to deal with same-sex marriage is, this is what I do when I'm going to marry a couple. Can be two men, can be two women, can be a man and a woman. I look for three things: love, commitment, and respect. Not the couple. Love, commitment, and respect. Show me when we talk here that we are ready to go in that direction in this type of relationship. So I feel more comfortable when I bless you in a marriage. Of course, I also marriage for the immigration paper, but that's not the issue. Okay, right now it's just for this one that we're going to have a big celebration. And I remember when we had the first marriage, 1990, San Ann Church. That's when the bishop suspended me. Okay. They say, we want to do this in the Sunday Mass. They said, well, that's a lot of people there. I said, yeah, we always want to see a lot of people. You know, I said, it's two men. It's okay, so let's do it like that. And one say, well, I always want to wear a female wedding dress, so I'm going to wear one. You say, do whatever you want to do. But this is what I want to see. I want to get the two of you sitting there in front of the congregation, facing the congregation, because this love, commitment, and respect always strike me. And I want to know why, after 42 years, the two of you living together, okay, what keep the two of you together? I want you to share that with the congregation, because the closer couple, the heterosexual couple, to them was 27 years. Everybody was married, remarried, and all that kind of things with divorce. We had children, we have people there, we have everybody listening to this couple. And I always remember the most reactionary woman in that congregation. When she raised her hand, they say, here we go. She said, probably you don't know this, but I've been married 5 times. I was not aware. Okay, so that was new for me. I'm listening to these two men talking about their relationship. I see the love, I see the commitment, I see the respect. That was missing in my relationship. Just sit down. It was like a giving a blessing, okay? And then we took it more serious. Well, the bishop can do whatever he want to do. He suspended me, but 6 months later, he had to bring me back because, you know, the whole activism of the LGBT community, especially in the Episcopal Church, hit it very strong. And he said, okay, I committed a mistake. He says, oh, okay, don't cross that line again. So, like abortion, marriage is a human right. And when people go into collecting taxes, they don't go into, oh, these are gay taxes, or these are lesbian taxes. We don't want these taxes. No, they take your taxes, so you have rights. You need to exercise those rights, okay? The issue of abortion, that, by the way, I forgot to share that, 87% of people against abortion in the US happen to be men. Listen to that. Hello, let women make the decision. If we let the woman make the decision, they're going to go for abortion. Okay, so then shut up. Okay, that is a real issue that we have there. The issue of white supremacy, male supremacy, as a foundation for all this, keeping the others out. We also need to look at something that Sam was pushing a little there, and came to my mind, Frank Fanon, Riches of the Earth. When oppressed people internalize the message of the oppressor, they justify the oppressor. And yes, we have some black people, we have some brown people, we have some yellow people who also believe this kind of nonsense theology, okay? But to make a generalization that we, black people, we Latinx, are so behind, and we all accept all this theology of rejection. That is not correct. That is not correct. But I want to finish with this. They can say abortion is illegal. That's not going to stop. What is going to happen is they're going to push abortion into the underground. And this is very dangerous because there's no a safe treatment to protect women who are going into places that you have no idea how they're going to perform the abortion. And it's going to happen the same with same-sex marriage. People getting married. I remember my grandmother who used to bless couples in the house, and I had no idea what she was doing, but she was blessing. It was a Yoruba a priest, the African tradition, with that power. And I saw her in the 60s blessing two men, blessing two women. I had no idea what she was doing. Later on, I became aware, okay, of blessing people that it was not possible to get married just because, let's say, for example, if we get married, heterosexual couple, if we get married, I'm going to lose the benefit of Social Security. Listen to that crap, okay? So now we need to find a way how to legalize the relationship that we have. So, my friends, they're not going to stop people's relationship. They're not going to stop the issue of abortion, but they're going to send it to the underground, and in the underground is more difficult because the issue of becoming a risk. Thank you.
Dr. Carmona, are you on? Can't hear you.
May I add just one thing while
Yes.
Dr. Carmona is coming on?
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yeah.
I will wait and if
Go
you have.
ahead. Right after Bishop Flunder, you can speak, Dr. Carmona.
I don't want to lose him. Just one thing that I was thinking about that you said, Father Barrios. In the African American Pentecostal church, which is what I was raised in, right? We always knew we had LGBT people in our churches. And there was a certain kindness. It was sort of like an understanding that you had an uncle that was a little different, you know, or an aunt that was a little different, but the family did not cast that person away. People showed up in places, particularly in music, and in culinary arts, in decoration. There was always a troop of brothers that were the ones that found the clothes and dressed the first lady of the church, or designed the robes, or created the pageants. There was always a group of men and women that were in these interesting, beautiful categories in the church. We didn't know exactly what to say. And even when it was clear to me that I was a same-gender loving woman, which I knew early in my life. And by the way, Shirley and I have been together for 38 years. But what I will say is that we were not unusual. I didn't leave the church at all to discover that I was the same-gender loving woman. There were plenty of teachers around us everywhere, just everywhere. And they are still there. And in addition to that, they told me, plain and simple, baby, this is what they told me. We see you. One of those women, an older woman, came to me. She said, we see you, honey. She said, let me tell you how to make it here. And I said, so what should I do? She said, get you a little husband. I said, get me a little husband. What does that mean? But I understood as she continued to talk to me that the safest way in her thinking for me to continue, not to turn away from who it is that I am, but to find me a man who would be willing to be a part of a triangulated relationship. Because that was the design to enable us to continue to be who it was that we were. I watched it happen all around me. Essentially, not only were they not wicked to one another, there was a very real in-place underground that still exists. And I know that it exists. And anybody that is involved in Black church and churches of color, that are involved in the Catholic Church, in the Episcopal Church, friends of mine, they know the secret that everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that is so hard for me to understand. Why are we even still talking about this? There are many different flowers in the beautiful garden of God, and none of them are exactly, even LGBT people, none are exactly the same as someone else. That's a part of creation. It has always existed. What is the issue? What is the problem? And if we'll do the work and do the reading that we need to read about sexual orientation and gender identification, do the work and understand we are not either John Wayne or Marilyn Monroe. Human beings are somewhere in the middle. Some of this and some of that. Some of the little husbands were happy to be little husbands. Let me just put it that way. And some of the wives were happy to be rather controlling. How can we put it that way? In those relationships, and they got along famously well. Let me put that on out there. Those things are what we need to shift, is our understanding. When did we start hating each other like this? When the religious right told us to.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop there.
You know, that brings me back to the issue I raised earlier, but I think it has to be mentioned. The immorality of Black and Latinx religious leaders who are trying to impose their doctrines on the people who are much more open. Black and Latinx people are much more open than the lies, than the racist lies about us that have been said. There's a great book, Bishop Flunder, when you said when my uncle, who's gay and everybody knows it doesn't speak about it, reminded me of a great work by Carlos de Sena, a professor at Rutgers University. It's called He Did Ethnography Among Dominican Gay Men in Washington Heights. And the book is called Tacit Subjects. And he talks about people in your family come to eat. Everybody knows that Uncle Raul is gay, but the same way that they don't ask heterosexuals, how was your sex last night? They don't ask him either, but they know it. Tacit subjects. And some of the better works that are coming out on queer theory are being written by people of color, because we are much more fluid and open to things, just like we're much more fluid and open to religiosity, in the same way that Nyya could practice Pentecostalism and then go into Haitian voodoo at the same time during the same prayer. We're able to do that. It's Euro-Americans who have more difficulty in doing that because they believe in hegemonic religion and hegemonic everything so that they can control. Dr. Carmona, you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Do you, I'm just gonna let you respond to any of the things that you've heard tonight that you want to mention.
Okay, let me begin by apologizing. We've had some real problems with our computer today, but
No kidding.
I want to thank Dr. Cruz, Brother Nyya, and my fellow sisters and brothers in the clergy for this presentation tonight. And I really appreciate what every one of you has said. It puts everything into different perspectives. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the evangelical and rightist centers of Christianity are just not even open to discussing some of the things that you brought tonight. And I think that we need to have more forums like these so that we can at least raise the level of consciousness to the point where people can at least begin to even think about it, even if they end up not fully agreeing. What I wanted to do in just a few minutes, if it's okay, I focus more on the critical race theory and the way Governor DeSantis in Florida and others have been reacting to this. And the idea, in fact, I just wrote a post about this yesterday on Facebook. People don't understand, just like, for example, in liberation theology, oppression and suffering are the starting points for biblical interpretation and theological reflections. And in the same vein, in the same spirit, I would say history. Okay, we can't treat history exclusively sequentially in terms of this happened first, this happened second, this happened third. To me, as a theologian from a historical standpoint, I think of racism and white supremacy as the focal point, okay, the starting point in order to do history. And I'll use a term that the late Reverend Dr. James Cone, professor of systematic theology at Union Seminary, used in his books, the central semantic axis. And I believe that white supremacy, especially white supremacy and racism, okay, its ally, are basically at the central point of USA history. We can't study history without looking at racism and white supremacy, okay, being at the core, being at the center of it. So, and as I pointed out in my post yesterday, there's no such thing as doing history tabula rasa, in that sense. In other words, a blank slate. We all bring our baggage of assumptions and presuppositions when we study history, whether it be the history of the United States, the history of the church, the history of whatever. We all bring that baggage of assumptions and presuppositions. And it just bothers me from a theological standpoint, okay, and also from a racial, ethnic, and cultural standpoint, okay, that they want to eliminate the critical race theory, and that there are people in the churches and the community of faith who go along with that spirit of wanting to go into what they call a colorblind type of history, which as far as I'm concerned, doesn't even exist. So I just wanted to bring that and at the same time express my appreciation to my sisters and brothers who have spoken before I was able to get on.
Thank you. In New York City, in the past few weeks, there have been busloads of immigrants that have been shipped over to New York City as if they were cattle with no food, no decent treatment, from Texas. So Father Barrios, would you like to share a few words about that situation? And all of you, but I'll start with Father Barrios at this time.
Oh, this is a very critical situation that is challenging us as church that is prophetic, because one of the things we need to do is criticize the government for the way they're handling this case. But at the same time, it's not just criticizing, we need to do something. So our particular church, Holy Rood, became a welcoming center. So if some of you are available, want to pass by on Friday, we're going to get hundreds of these immigrants who they dropped them in the Port Authority. So we have people who go there, get them, bring them to Holy Rood Church. We have a welcoming committee so people can feel that I have dignity. That's the biggest issue right now here. But then from there, they've been for 3 or 4 days without taking a shower. So shower, eating, clothes. We have a team of medical doctors from the hospital that we put together, a legal team, so they can deal with the legal aspect, and then they refer to the churches. Not always we're lucky enough to get everybody into a shelter. So that forced us to convert the church into an evening shelter. This is happening not only in this church, in different places in the city right now. So I'm talking more about our experience. The mayor went there to take photos and all that kind of nonsense. Nothing else, doing nothing, okay? Electoral officers want to get inside the church to take photos. Say, you're not coming here. This is exploitation. No, do something, okay? People need to eat, people need clothes. But also, from a progressive perspective, we need to understand that a lot of what's going on in those countries that are pushing out these poor people, working class people, because rich people do not get out of those countries. When they get out, they come here to do tourism. It's working class poor people. It's because USA foreign policy into this country. 90% of the people who are coming into the city happen to be from Venezuela. But look at what the USA foreign policy is doing to this country. They want to strangle the economy of this country so they can collapse the government. But that is forcing people to get out, looking at least for hope. So it's good that we can make a contribution. But until right now, the biggest issue, because not everybody is vulnerable the same way. If you happen to be a woman, you are more vulnerable. And if you are children, forget it. But the LGBT community that is coming from Latin America, especially trans, they don't want them in the church. It's an incredible harassment, sexual abuse, throwing them into the street, and we've been forced to open the church and protect this particular population that is being expelled. So we are facing this crisis at this moment, and I go around with other churches that we say, no, we're not going to deal with this issue. Okay, you don't want to deal with this issue, but we're going to deal with this issue. Can you at least help us in something? Yeah, we can help you in something. What you want? Can you send food? Can you send clothes? Can you send money? Oh my God. The most reactionary churches, you have to see the love. Okay? Once you scratch them a little, oh, there is something that we call love. So they are sending, they became part of this particular ministry because we're not doing this ourselves. So I want to share this because more people are coming. White supremacists in Texas are taking advantages of this. They're shipping people here because there is a plan to deconstruct all these sanctuary cities. And they know New York City is a heavy one. So they say, oh, you're a sanctuary city? Take this one. And they send in immigrants here, thousands of them, into the city. And once they get there, they get lost. So I'm glad that at least faith community are doing something to respond to the crisis and say, we're here to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that Bishop Flunder and Bishop-elect Vanessa Brown have to leave soon, but we have a few questions from the audience. So we would like to take that opportunity now before they leave to do
Yes. Thank you all so much. I'm going to welcome Minister Bridget Webster up to ask some questions to Bishop Brown and Bishop Flunder and Dr. Cruz. Also, I just want to let all of you know for this time that this is conversational. So feel free to, be at the kitchen table, as I say, and interject, over talk. That's okay. I hope we all won't take it to heart. And we will know that our heads are moving in the work that needs to be done. So Bridget, I pass it over to you.
Before Bridget comes, really quickly, I just want to respond to Father Louis Barrios and what he
course.
just said about
As I said,
9,000 people, y'all, 9,000. A great number of them went to DC and a great number of them came to New York City. But I wanted to bring this point out because this is a point that is often used against LGBTQI people, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? It's often interpreted as a condemnation of homosexuality, but the prophets clearly refute that interpretation, right? The crime of Sodom and Gomorrah was not homosexuality, but cruelty and inhospitality, which is what we see happening coming out of Florida and Texas. This is what your sister Sodom has done wrong. She and her daughters were proud that they had plenty of food and had peace and they had security, but they did not have help. They did not help the poor and they did not help the needy. Ezekiel 16:49. And so I want the conservative Christians and all of those who are for what's happening to understand what the text really says and what it really means. What they are doing is inhospitable and it is cruel and it is inhumane.
Thank you. Thank you. Bridget.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Bishop. We do have a question from Roberta Todd on Facebook. This one is for Bishop Brown and Bishop Flunder. How can we collaborate with the women we call white to realize that this issue should support the end of white supremacy? So how can we collaborate with the women we call white to realize this issue should support the end of white supremacy?
There's a couple of things that Bishop-elect Vanessa and I have been talking about over the last few weeks because of some experiences that we have had, where we've been welcomed cautiously, but welcomed into some communities in conversation with the people that I come to call conservative liberals, because they are in many ways an untapped group of folk that I think we need to pay some attention to. They are not blood-curdling conservatives. Let's just be very, very clear. They are also not, by virtue of the lack of experience, really in the struggle with people who are working for what we would call liberation, essentially people who are working and pushing toward bringing an end to a number of things: racism, sexism, homophobia. There's a lot of things. Some of these things, their privilege in life has never caused them to be exposed to, the truth be told. And if they were exposed to it, they still were able to succeed well because they were in another strata, in a different, but so now they're trying to figure out what can they do? What can they keep? And what do they need to jettison? How can they help? They are not rabid conservatives, but they are somewhat afraid of really embracing and being seen embracing the concepts and things that have to do with liberals, what is considered a liberal. So they're fence sitters. You understand what I'm talking about. And needless to say, sitting on a fence is real uncomfortable. So there's a certain degree of uncomfortability that exists for them. I would like to say to folks who fit in that category right now, that we see you and we know who you are.
Minister, Bishop, minister.
We understand you. And we also know that what you don't want to be is somehow inactive altogether. We want to encourage you to go back to something that Bishop-elect Vanessa said earlier on. Let's begin with encouraging your friends to vote the rights of others. Actively engage your community, to be engaged in getting people out to the polls to vote for what you know is just and right. Use the telephone. Be actively a part of helping people to sign up and get what they need to get in place to be able to vote. Help the elderly to get to the polls. Do what you can do. I think the rest of it is, you now have to speak to the people who will not speak to us. They will not speak to us because they feel afraid to even be seen speaking with us directly. I encourage you, find the things that are just and right that you can together vote on and have conversation about, and encourage your friends to have conversation about. Because it is that movable middle right there. And the young people who will be voting for the first time that will be the ones that will move the needle away from the wickedness and the meanness and the prejudice and the hatred and the vitriol that is being done right now in the name of God. And I am saying to those of you who want to do what's right and know that there is right to do the important things that matter, if we are going to do what Jesus said, pray this: thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. then we need to stop sowing our lives into the people who are talking about heaven and get engaged in bringing heaven to earth. That was the intention. Your kingdom come on earth. What is your role to bring the realm of God and good and justice into the earth? How about into the earth? We spend too much time worrying about what's going to happen when we die. How about we bring the kingdom of God into the earth? We need you to do that and encourage your friends to do that. What are the justice issues that you can connect to? And how can you get your friends to connect to it? We need your help. We need your help. We need your help. You are the movable middle, and you are the ones who will make change. God bless.
I know we have limited time, so I would like Bridget to ask that other question that we have in the chat for Bishop Brown. I know that was directed at both of you, but we're going to give you some time with a different question.
Yes. So this next question is, what are some practical ways we can curate LGBT affirming and pro-choice spaces in the church? So how can we, better serve those that are marginalized within the church, capital C church?
That are pro-choice. So there are organizations that are already set. There's one called Sacred, SACRED, and you can work with that organization. Any one of you can work with that organization. They work with LGBTQI plus people, and they will come to your congregation. Your pastor can belong to that. Your congregation can belong to that. And they talk about reproductive rights, and they talk about justice issues as it relates to abortion rights and pro-choice. And so I think that I named that particular organization because my church is connected to it and the fellowship is connected to it. And so I believe that that's a great idea for people to get connected to justice organizations that are already doing the work, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are already people that are already on the ground, already get connected, like Bishop Flunder said, and there are connecting tissues. Find what it is that works for you and get connected to it.
And Bishop Brown, can you speak right before you leave to the clergy, and not just pastors and people in senior leadership, but elders and deacons that are even struggling with their leadership over these issues and are on the fence, as Bishop Flunder said, and don't know what to say, don't know what to do, but know that senior pastor might have made a wrong decision, and they're the hands and feet that are serving folks. What is the pastoral care and the spiritual care that needs to happen? What does that look like for folks who aren't doing the work just as you are, but are feeling that calling and are struggling because they are ordained in places that aren't affirming? What do you have for them before you leave?
I think that it's important that if you are connected to a particular organization that you don't feel affirmed in, I'm not going to just say leave. What I'm going to say is that you need to try to connect to another entity that is affirming. You need to start getting books. You need to start connecting with other leaders, right? You don't have to leave your church, but maybe it's something that you can bring to your pastor's attention that he is not seeing, that he is not knowing, that he is not understanding, or that she is not understanding in terms of the work. I also would encourage these deacons and other people to invite, if they have the power, right, to invite other people in to speak that are affirming, right, that can help to move the congregation to the place and the pastor to where they need to be. Now, we've had these conversations with Bishop Flunder, and the reason why we were appointed Episcopal liaisons in this particular area is because that was our work. Our work was to go and to speak to congregations and pastors who were the movable middle, to find out, first of all, what are ways that we could connect first, right? I'm not there to lambaste you. I'm not there to tell you that you're wrong, but we needed to find a way to connect.
And I know I'm out of time, and I said that would be my last. But what about in that same regard with families, when folks have a a family member who is making reproductive right choices, or is queer, or and the family member doesn't know how to be a family member anymore because of their faith. To these folks who are navigating such harsh decisions due to our society. How do we be there? How do we care?
Bishop Flunder.
Couple things. Encouraging people to read.
Yes.
Knowledge is power.
Yes.
Beyond the gatekeepers, where we have these conversations midweek on Wednesday evenings, that is curated by Bishop-elect Vanessa. We bring people in, and some of them are LGBT, some of them are women, some of them are straight, some of them identify as Black and people of color. There's all sorts of realities. What our commonality is radical inclusivity.
Yeah.
Radical inclusivity, extravagant grace, and relentless hospitality, which should be the heart of the church. I would encourage you. She has an author's list. Read and educate yourself. Understand that we don't know everything about human realities, often because we are not reading what we really need to read to understand African spirituality and same gender realities, and Native American spirituality and same gender realities, and Muslim realities. There's just so much we could say, but we don't see the full gamut because we are not embracing what we really need to. We have a Catholic father with us tonight. Let's just be clear. We have these theologians who are here, who are brilliant people, who are well experienced in the work. And there are many books. Don't stand on the sideline trying to figure out what to do. There are so many books to read, so many opportunities to expand and to grow. Read. And one other thing, parents, my mother was a staunch Pentecostal all of her life. And my come outness was a burden to my mother in the environment where she lived. And it took me a while to understand that my coming out was not just my coming out. It forced her in her environment to experience some pain. And for a period of years, we didn't even talk to one another. That's how tight these religious environments can be. I was on punishment, and she was on punishment because it was something wrong with me and something wrong with her for allowing me to be me. And our reconciliation shifted in many ways an integral part of our denomination. I need you to understand the importance of the power of this. We want the parents to know we love you and we understand your sacrifice too. When you embrace us as LGBT people, as women clergy, when we are embraced in that way, we owe you a debt of gratitude because we know the price that you have to pay. Remember that when we're encouraging the people who we need to have come along, that there is a price also for them to pay. And our community as LGBT people, we should have matured enough now to celebrate that and to be a womb for them while they are also without friends and being diminished by their own communities. Love is powerful. God is love. So love is powerful. God bless you, and thank you all for asking Bishop-elect and I the hard questions.
Bishop Flunder and Bishop Brown, I am so grateful for you two accepting to participate in this panel this evening. I hope that this is the first of many events we do together, and I hope to bring you down to Sunset Park, Brooklyn soon, the church. Thank you very much. I know you have to leave, so we really appreciate it. And we'll continue for another 15 minutes or so with Dr. Barrios and Dr. Carmona with some questions from the audience. God bless you too.
Thank you. Blessings.
Thank you. And so, yes, continuing on in this same spirit, I have some questions for my good mentors in the struggle, as I say. And so this one comes from a good friend of many of us. Edgar Rivera Colon asks, how do we secure or expand our local faith communities in the wake of the undeclared, ongoing civil war and institutional collapse? So how do we expand our local faith communities and secure them, those that we already have?
Well, one of the things that I do, and it's workable, is that I bring all these issues inside the church during the sermon, but with time enough to open the floor. I don't want people talking other places. I say, what you have to say for what I did here, okay? Bring in the topic, talking about this inside the church during the liturgy is a healing process. The other issue is that once we identify a critical mass of people, we train them, and then we start sending them out, planting churches. I learned that from the Pentecostal, okay? They go places. Let's go and share the good news. So that is something that is being very productive in what we do there in first St. Anne's in the Bronx, then St. Mary's, then San Romero, and now Holy Rood Church in the Washington High Community. We have good news. We always criticize the Jehovah's Witness, our brothers and sisters. You close the door here, they go to the other door. They go all over the places. And I say, why is that I'm not doing that? Why is that I'm so scared to go out and share the good news that I have? Why is that I don't want to stand in a corner and start preaching or talking to people about the experience that I had with Jesus Christ? Okay, so that is part of this commitment. Share the good news, okay? And I'm a person who really believes in the power of prayer. I see miracles, okay? We encourage people to pray, pray, and pray. And especially when they get difficult with all these topics, we pray, pray, and pray. We look for the leadership of God. If God is leading us in this direction, let us believe in this. Take the risk, okay? Take the risk, and we're going to get there. Amen.
Amen. Dr. Carmona. Oh, wait, you're on mute.
You're muted.
On mute.
Uh-oh, we lost you again.
On mute.
Okay, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I have to admit that every time I hear the word expansion, I tend to cringe because it just reminds me of what I call, for lack of a better term, ecclesiastical imperialism. And I think in terms of the church expanding itself as an institution rather than expanding the reign of God in Christ. So really that word expansion, really scares, in that sense, the living hell out of me. But going back to what Dr. Barrios said a few seconds ago, okay, I don't think it's a question of expanding ourselves as an institution, but expanding the work of the reign of God. For example, if we look at the ministry of Jesus, he was not trying to expand the Jewish religion as an institution. He was actually expanding, okay, and commissioning his followers to expand in turn the work of God on earth, okay? Healing the sick, okay? Visiting the widows, the orphans, okay? Taking care of the oppressed. So I think that Father Barrios, in that respect, put things in their proper perspective, okay, and clarifying that it's not a question about expanding the church per se or expanding the institutional religion, as we say, but rather expanding the work of God in the community and in the society.
Thank you. So I have a question, especially for all three of you. All three of you have roots to the island of Puerto Rico. identify as Black Puerto Ricans. And today, Puerto Rico remains the oldest colony in the world, and is under United States ownership, exploitation. And there are conversations about the gentrification of Puerto Rico, the mass exodus of indigenous Puerto Ricans migrating away for better opportunities. There's environmental justice that is becoming an issue all over the Caribbean. And yet, with all of this, in my opinion, being Black and being Puerto Rican remains taboo, remains ambiguous for some. Some try to benefit from being racially ambiguous as Puerto Ricans. And yet Puerto Ricans are participants, at least in the mainland, of US elections and follow US politics very closely. And I would say even at times flip between being pro-American and pro Puerto Rican based on the political issue at hand and their personal outlook. So if they're an evangelical Christian and American politics are going in the evangelical way, then they are pro-USA, right? And then even on the island, and if they're not, an evangelical, or if they're more liberal, then when US politics are going in a more liberal direction, they might get behind that and feel inspired. And so I guess I ask all of this to bring Puerto Rico into this discussion. Both Puerto Rico, the island, and those in the diaspora. What do we do? What do you have what advice do you have to give to your people of Puerto Rico as they continue in the struggle?
Oh, I'll let Dr. Cruz and Dr. Barrios speak first.
To be quite honest, the question that you asked is a good question, but it's much too complicated to answer in a short few minutes. And to some way, it's not nuanced enough because it's not as black and white as I think you portrayed it. So it's a little bit more complicated what's happening and how there are too many issues going on right now. So I don't want to do injustice to the situation of Puerto Rico. Maybe Dr. Barrios has something to say, but I don't, I just feel you asked too many things in one question that can't be answered that simply, because how people behave and what people do is not that easily understandable either. There's many reasons why people do stuff and their behaviors. So it's, I don't want to do injustice to the reality.
Well, so then how do we care for them while trying to navigate those nuances? Because I think,
well, we're all doing stuff. I'm going there on the 20th with an activity called Despierta Boricua that Diane Morales has been leading up. And we're raising $250,000 to try to give some money to organizations that did good work during Hurricane Maria. So we're doing some of that. And other people are doing different things. Father Barrios, myself, Carmona, Dr. Carmona, 40 years ago, if it was 40 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, when he got his doctorate at Rochester Divinity School, wrote his thesis on the independence of Puerto Rico. And if I remember correctly, he equated not wanting independence with prostitution, basically, something like that, of that kind. So we've all been contributing. There's little things that we've been doing, like everybody does in all areas. But it is definitely, I'm not trying to sidestep the question, is definitely a difficult situation that Puerto Ricans have been struggling with for a long time. And the problem is that the country of Puerto Rico is fighting against the most powerful country in the world, the United States. It's imbued with hypocrisy because we sent 30 billion to Ukraine to free itself from Russian grip. But we have a Ukraine called Puerto Rico in the Caribbean. So it is complicated, but we've all been struggling, supporting political prisoners who have fought. The campaign to free Oscar Rivera Lopez was successful after 35 years, but it was successful. Obama finally commuted or pardoned him. But the whole issue of religion, evangelicalism, and the island, the problem is that Puerto Rico is a colony, but the rest of Latin America is a neo-colony. So it's a different type of colonial setting. So it's not easy. They're not easy answers to the complicated situation of the island of Puerto Rico.
I will add to that. I wrote my PhD dissertation 39 years ago from a psychological perspective because my PhD is in clinical psychology. Psychological colonialism, just to portray what's going on here in Puerto Rico. We talk about economic colonialism, we talk about political colonialism, but we don't talk too much about psychological colonialism. How is, which is from Fanon theory, okay, when the oppressed people internalize the message of the oppressor, and you hear this very frequent in Puerto Rican, yes, it's good to be independent. However, okay, there goes the explanation. I think also when it comes to deal with issues of racism and decolonization, we have a fascinating, some kind of Macondo, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez used to say. The father of the statehood in Puerto Rico, Jose Celso Barbosa, was a black man. I never had conversation with black people in the US about what's the condition of black people here. But also, practically the father of the independent movement in Puerto Rico, Pedro Albizu Campos, was also black. So we have an incredible contribution here that we need to go back. However, everything in Puerto Rico right now in politics is white supremacy. Everything. Male white supremacy. It's an incredible rejection. I became aware that I'm black in Puerto Rico. Now when I came here, they remind me every day that I'm black and that I was coming from Los Caseríos, where poor people practically live. But there is something that we need to understand, and Sam was hitting very strong there. Let me put it this way. We are the most important colony of the most powerful country in this world. Okay? That do not mean that we can't find the independence and decolonization of Puerto Rico. By any means necessary, we're gonna do it. Believe me. Now I'm talking like a prophet. We're gonna do it. Okay. Thank you.
I'll try to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just try to, because I know that time is running out, but for us in the Puerto Rican diaspora here in the United States, the question is always going to be, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Just like the Jews, who were in Babylon and being taunted by the people in Babylon, sing us a song. Well, how in the world can we sing the Lord's song? How can we sing our song in a strange land? And let me point out one particular irony, okay? In the predominantly Puerto Rican Pentecostal movement, okay, which has a strong emphasis on the moving and operation of the Holy Spirit, when you look at the biblical and theological hermeneutics, okay, it goes back to what Dr. Barrios just mentioned a few minutes ago, okay, the biblical and theological hermeneutics of the Puerto Rican and basically Latino Pentecostal movement, okay, amounts to psychological colonization. Because if you look at the theology and the biblical orientation, you'll notice that it was a theology that was brought to Puerto Rico and Latin America by the white Protestant missionary enterprise. Okay, and they don't realize it. Okay, maybe they don't even think about it, but that is the reality. How do we deal with psychological colonization? How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?
I wanna, we're gonna end a little early because the Bishop Flunder and Bishop Vanessa had to leave, but I wanna take this opportunity to thank my two friends and colleagues, Father Barrios and Dr. Juan Carmona. First of all, not thank you only for your friendship, but for your prophetic leadership. I know very few Latino pastors that have been so consistently prophetic without fear. I mean, Father Barrios is my hero in terms of the work he does. And Dr. Carmona is also my hero and how he's able to write in brief and concise ways about important public issues. Thank you so much for being with us. And I want to thank Bridget for helping us out once again. And thank Nyya for hosting alongside me for this special event. We hope to do one of these in Spanish, all in Spanish for the Latinx community. Thank you all who were watching via Facebook or through the webinar process. Take care and have a good night.
Thank you, Dr. Cruz.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
God bless.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Ashe.